I'm Gary Louie. I'm a candidate for State Representative District 16. I know some of you in this room. I appreciate the time you take to be involved in the community and search out the best candidates. I hope I can prove to you that I am the best candidate for this seat. There are six candidates. I'm not sure how many of that you will be talked to, intend to talk to. I will start by saying that I'm a native Texan. I'm a first-generation American. My father came with his family early in the last century to the United States, where they had the opportunity to be successful. They were entrepreneurs. I'm not sure the full story, but they found their way to San Antonio, Texas. My mother was a melting pot American, part Irish, part English. That part came out of the Virginia, West Virginia area, and she found her way to San Antonio, where my parents found each other. My first real work experience was bussing tables for my father's restaurant when I was in junior high school. After I finished college at Texas Lutheran College, my first real job was as a classroom teacher teaching high school. And as I said last night at a different forum, there's nothing more exciting than to see a bright, young, potential scientist static test his home-built solid fuel rocket that was strapped to the stairwell railing in the school. And yes, I do miss those days, but my wife and I decided to move to a brand new community called the Woodlands, Texas, where we went into a retail business. I owned an automotive repair store for 25 years. We have a worldwide chain of one store in the Woodlands. We were fortunate, we sold it in 2001. During that time, I was very active, thinking I was paying forward to the community, active in nonprofit work, serving on the United Way board, the YMCA board, the Friendship Center, which is dealing with senior adult services, building relationships. I also served 10 years as mayor of Oak Ridge North, and I served some overlap, some concurrent time with the Woodlands Township, Woodlands Town Center Improvement District that was enabled the year the mall opened. The sign threw me off there. That's all right. After we sold the business, I was fortunate that I served nonprofits and a professional staff, most notably the Friendship Center, providing meals, transportation, activities for senior adults. And I also worked for the YMCA, helping create youth programs, after-school programs for working families. I think I'm the most qualified. I have the greatest depth, the greatest breadth of all candidates in the race. I've served in governmental positions, and I've served in leadership positions on behalf of the community. How do I do?
11 seconds to go.
Oh, I can fill that in?
I'll go ahead and open the questions with a two-part question. When's the last time you read the state party platform, and are there any planks you disagree with, and please explain?
Well, in anticipation of running the race, I have a copy of the state platform in the car, but I read it closely and thoroughly in September, end of September, early October. Pulled off a copy. I thought obviously that was appropriate if I'm going to run on a Republican ticket to know what the platform is. I don't agree with all of it completely, but I cannot be honest with you and say that I know what I disagree with. I have to pull the copy out and review it, and nothing just jumps out of my mind in that regard.
Any other questions?
What will be your biggest piece of legislation or accomplishment you want to accomplish?
Assuming you mean in the first session or my second session? What is your name? I'm sorry.
Chris.
Chris. I think the number one issue throughout the district, and I assume everybody in here knows what the district is, but it's a very linear district from the 59 corridor in East Montgomery County all the way through the lake, and includes the north part of Montgomery County. And the number one concern by far is water access issues. And I think I would strive to serve on the appropriate committees and work with others of like mind to resolve the disparities of the rules related to surface water and water that they term being in the banks and underground water sources known as aquifers. Quite frankly, I've had 3 months examining the issues, and the engineering and the commentary on that can be very confusing, and it can reach both ends of the spectrum. And you talk about the last 20 or 30 or 40 years history and how that equates to the next 20 or 30 or 40 years projections. And so I think the first thing we need to do is find some equality to the rules based upon the surface water and the groundwater, and find some unity there so that everybody can be talking on the same level.
Yeah, would you support a repeal of the 17th Amendment?
I'm sorry?
Would you support the repeal of the 17th Amendment?
I have to admit, I don't know what the 17th Amendment is.
Popular election of U.S. Senators. Popular election of U.S. Senators.
It was previously each of the houses in the states.
Right. Right. Yeah, the original Constitution called that the state legislative bodies would elect or appoint the 2 senators of each state. And if I remember my American history, it was after near the turn of the century that they
1913.
a little bit before I was born, but yeah, probably the same year they passed income tax.
Yeah.
Well, quite frankly, that's the first time that question has been asked, and I had not thought about it. That's
Do
best
you have a gut reaction one way or the other?
No.
Do you support open carry or constitution carry? Or the Second Amendment?
You know, at one time that was asking me early in the process, and was asking me on the website, I forget if it was on my in response to an email I sent out or on my Facebook page, and like water issues, social media communication is on a steep learning curve. And at the time I thought, why not? But then I talked to a chief of police, James Napolitano, who is the chief of police in Montgomery. And we were discussing that, and he said that, and he made sense to me, that there's really no value of open carry, and it tends to create a situation that shouldn't exist. If you have concealed ability and you can protect yourself and your family by carrying a weapon or a gun but it is concealed, it doesn't create a heightened awareness by walking into a room and say, I got a gun.
Right.
And so after that conversation, my tendencies and my leanings are that it doesn't bring value to society by being able to carry a long gun, a rifle, a holster on the outside into a public place, and you know you'd really have to convince me, I think, that there was value.
I would say it just comes back to Freedom 101 and the intent of our founding fathers. For example, I probably wouldn't open carry if it was legal, but I might do a hybrid, like if I came in here and I wanted to take my coat off because I was hot, I wouldn't have to worry about doing that. I wouldn't have
you're carrying a shoulder holster.
Yeah, if I was carrying concealed, I could take my coat off and not worry about being in violation of the law, or I could accidentally brandish and not worry about being in violation of the law. But it really gets back to more of a fundamental question, which is, see, right now CHL is a privilege, it's not a right, because they can snap it away from you just like that, and that's not right. It should be a right, and sometimes there's a price to freedom, and if we're not willing to pay a price for freedom, then at what point does government stop telling us what isn't a good idea? Because it just gets to the point where we have Obamacare, because people might make the wrong decisions in regards to their healthcare, so we're gonna tell you what you should do in regards to your healthcare. So if you cross that line there, you have it's a slippery slope all the way down to Obamacare, totalitarian society, et cetera, et cetera. So I come from a more freedom aspect.
I understand. I would still have to seek advice of public safety officers, as I did with Napolitano and.
Well, several other states have it, and they don't huge issues, so. Dave?
How do you stand on benefits for same-sex partners?
I'm against that, unqualified. I'm not sure if I'm searching to fill in 2 minutes, but I don't believe that should be a presumed right by a couple, whether they left the state, got married someplace else and came back, as our mayor down in Houston. But no, I don't believe that is necessarily a right. I guess what I'm hedging, I'm not sure it would be a legislative issue. I think if a company wants to provide that as a benefit for the employees, then the company should be able to do that. But in terms of mandating that all companies that are providing benefits provide that to the same-sex partner, I could not support that.
Legislative.
Yeah, kind of a follow-up on that. So you mentioned you talked to this chief of police about carry. So would you agree that the statement that walking into a room with an open gun has de facto already admitted a status mentality that guns are left for the hands of the police?
No.
Why not?
Well, I'm just relaying a conversation that was given to me through.
Oh, you agree with that?
I found a sense in it. And I would think that I would respect, let me rephrase that. I respect the opinion of a police officer that has to deal with weapons day in and day out, and his comment. And I would carry that conversation further and continue to seek that advice before I made a firm decision.
Do you agree, do you agree with the ability of citizens to make stupid decisions?
We see that in Washington every day.
No. Do you agree with people's ability to make stupid decisions? Do you agree with the citizens' ability? Do you agree that the government?
Yes, I believe citizens can make stupid decisions.
And you believe they have the right to?
Oh, sir?
Okay.
Mine's kind of a three-part question leading into the third part. The first one is, how long ago did you decide to run for this position?
For this position or run for state legislature?
State legislature.
I first considered running for state legislature in 1992, 93, when Bob Raybuck was our representative. He served Conroe and the east side of the freeway.
Okay, so you've been following what's going on in the state legislature pretty closely, and that's the second part.
Not intimately. I have been in and out of the legislative process for other reasons. And to continue the answer, it fell off my radar over the last 8 or 10 years. I served on behalf in public policy work for the YMCA and other organizations, and that four-letter word being a lobbyist, if you will, but to encourage certain legislation to be passed on behalf of after-school programs, meal programs, transportation programs for senior adults, up until, in fact, up until the 2013 session.
Okay, so you've been following it real closely over the last year or two?
Yeah, well, you're using that word closely. I can't agree that I've watched it, I've followed it intimately, but I follow it as a casual observer.
Okay, so with that, and pretty decent knowledge of what's happening there, do you support House Speaker Joe Strauss?
I can't make a comment to that. I know Joe Strauss from a social aspect. I mentioned that in another forum, only because we're from the same city and our paths has crossed. I think I was not watching closely how the speaker was chosen and all the ins and outs and issues. It just wasn't a concern of mine in that regard. I know that's a hot topic with certain groups, but I think it'd be difficult to say without knowing who the other candidates are. And I know there's filings that have started for that, but I've just not followed it that closely to know who the other candidates are and their positions. So,
Ken?
Ken? Ken.
Okay. Yeah, what's your position on the NSA looking at emails and scanning us when we go to the airports, and what can we as Texans do about it?
I'm not sure what we can do about it right now. I think it's a tremendous overreach by a governmental agency, from what I read. I have not been convinced that there was much justification in it. I know that
How is that different than a police officer saying open carry is bad? I mean, there's plenty of security experts saying this is something you have to do.
because I respect the opinion of James Napolitano, and I spoke to him about that particular issue. And I pursued that with other people in the security business about whether or not we should be drilling into the private lives of our citizens.
Okay.
Phyllis?
Sir, it says in here that you started voting in the early 80s in the Republican primaries.
Okay.
What did you vote before that?
I'm not sure I was active with that.
If your constituents overwhelmingly wanted you to not vote for Joe Strauss for speaker, would you support your constituents, or would you just vote however you wanted?
I think the term representative means that regardless of what my personal feelings are, that I represent the majority of the constituents. Now, how I gather that information, hopefully I'm smart enough to listen to all parts and pieces and input before that decision has to be made.
So, to kind of counter that, if there was a position that you felt really strongly, if the court were to would you go the route of your constituents, or would you go?
And my core beliefs were contrary to what the constituents believe?
Yes.
No, I still maintain and contend that my role is to represent District 16, the residents, the constituents, the voters, the people that live there, and I hope I'm intelligent enough to have vehicles in place that I get their input routinely, and I also feel I'm smart enough to have a sense of what the majority of the constituency believes their core values are.
Okay.
Yeah, there was some rumbling in the last couple of years, especially with Speaker Strauss and his family connections to legalize gambling along the coast, of not here in Montgomery County, but along the coast, to bring in more money for the state. So it wouldn't be local here. So how do you think that would impact, would that have an impact on the county, first of all? And second of all, how would you look at something like that?
Legalize gambling in general, or legalize gambling along the coast? I'm not a proponent or favor of legalized gambling. I don't think that's necessarily a vehicle, revenue vehicle that would be positive for the state. So whether it's along the coast or on the Indian reservations or in the neighborhood bar and grill, I'm just not in favor of legalized gambling.
Have you done any studies on Agenda 21, and if so?
The only issue that comes up with Agenda 21 was in an interview with the Montgomery County Tea Party. I did some reading on it. I don't necessarily have an opinion on it one way or the other. I know that many residents are concerned, and many groups are concerned about the impact of Agenda 21. But I really don't have I don't have an opinion one way or the other about it at this point.
I'm sure you're pro-life, everyone's pro-life, but do you have exceptions to the life issue? Exceptions? Where would your
I'm not, you know, I'm not, I think that the huge difficulty in drafting legislation are trying to gather all the what-ifs that are involved. And I forget if you were at the Eagle Forum that night, and I relayed a bit of a transition in my thinking over the last 2 or 3 months for many, many, many years. And I'm the father of 3 daughters. And so my thinking related to abortion was more from the female perspective. Now, obviously, I don't have an emotional sense of what that can mean, and I'm not aware of anyone in my life that has had to struggle with that decision, whether it was a woman in my life that was dear to me or any of my children. So I had somewhat of a removed sense of what that all meant, but I always took it as a fact related to how does this impact the pregnant woman and her close family members and her advisors, whether it's a faith advisor or whoever that might be. And until I met with Dr. Jim Schultz, who is a precinct chair in Montgomery County. And he really threw a little cold water on my way of thinking related to the pain of the fetus. And he sent me quite a bit of information that I've tried to read through, that I have been reading through. I'm not sure I understand it all, but he did send me, and I do appreciate that. So from that moment of conception, so to come back to Betty's question, I'm not sure I've really come to a personal conclusion about what those exceptions may be, if there are any at all. And again, it may be one of those issues where I'd have to reach out to my constituency to get a sense of what is the desire of the community. I can't think of any, after talking to Dr. Jim and getting some of that information, I cannot think of any exceptions other than the dire circumstance of the fetus. You know, I think, you know, one of the, and you just have to stop me because this is obviously a very emotional. You know, the disconnect of the young woman in Fort Worth.
Yes.
Last week, a couple weeks ago, and just seeking the medical advice. And I know that the hospital, the doctors really struggled with what was not only, I assume they were really struggling with what was the legal issue, but I believe it was a Catholic hospital, so they must have been struggling with the moral issue also. And what was the life of the fetus? I never read in any of that information, the news information, whether the fetus was still alive or kept alive.
Yes, it was still alive, as long as she was still hooked up to the machine, it was still alive.
And what the projection of development was and some of those. So it obviously is a very emotional, very difficult issue, but I cannot think of any particular exceptions in my mind without hundreds and hundreds of pages of legislation, crafting out exceptions on every particular case that might arise.
You have time for one more question?
Time for two more.
Yeah, in 2000, you were a financial supporter of David Benson Brunson as a Democratic state senator in District 4 at the start of his run for land commissioner in 2000. Right now, the legislature has a 2/3 majority. How important is it to you that Republicans reach across the aisle from that standpoint, even with a 2/3 supermajority?
I'm just pulling all that together. I think it's important that everyone, both in the House as well as the Senate, is open to conversation with their counterparts. You know, obviously, I am not the most conservative candidate in this particular race. And in Austin, there's a wide range of political thought. But I think it's counterproductive for the entire process to walk in the door and throw up a shield and say, these are my beliefs, and if you want to get inside my house, you're going to have to bend your beliefs. I think that the ability to have conversations and understand the other person's point of view, to be able to communicate my point of view, and to have that adult conversation to find if middle ground is possible and it's acceptable, then that's just necessary. That's just part, I think that, quite frankly, I believe that's something we've lost in government. I think that especially in Washington, that certain sides get so entrenched that it just muddles the process. We've lost the art of statesmanship and in conversation and discussion.
We get to 3 minutes to close.
I think out of the 6 candidates, we've really, at least 5 of us have grown relatively close. 4 of us have grown relatively close. After forums, we see each other, we try to tear up each other's signs, we drain the gas out of each other's tires and cars. I think we all respect each other. I think there's 4 of us that decided if we can kind of meld into one person, we'd be a great state representative. I do believe that I do worry that there is, and I know the camera's on someplace, but we do worry that there's one candidate that's trying to buy his way into the race. And then there's one candidate that nobody seems to know why he bought it, quite frankly. But for the most part, I think I have the deepest experience of the candidates. I'm in a position to hit the ground running. I have the broadest breadth, the broadest experiences and the multiple facets that we need to examine in the governing process. And I'm not so single focused on any particular issue. I'm not carrying a small bag to solve a small number of problems. But I also believe I'm open enough to listen to all conversations, not only within the district, and most importantly within the district, because the district itself is rather diverse. The constituency in the East Montgomery County area is completely different than what you might see in the state. School districts, what Conroe ISD, it's unique in the sense that we have 5 school districts that are all different, have different needs, different roadways, different things. And I think I just carried that depth of experience and that breadth of experience that will serve the residents of District 16 well. so I got another 2 or 3 hours. I appreciate it.